Malcolm here from Studio Tortured Games. Today I'm going to show you how to play Hex Barons. So Hex Barons is a micro-skirmish board game for 1 or 2 players with 3 and 4 player modes in development. So it should be noted before we get into it that this version of the game is 0.8. So some things might have changed, there might be new rules or different components, but this video should give you a good overview of how to play the game. In Hex Barons, players take on the role of, well, Hexed Barons. You're a horrible leader in charge of a squad of characters or units, and your goal is to defeat your opponent's units in battle and be the first to reach the victory point target for your chosen scenario, which is indicated here. If this is your first time playing, we recommend that you go through the introductory scenario, which will help you learn the game incrementally and progressively, and it also has cool comics. Okay, so let's dig in. To set up the game, you will first need a scenario map. The game includes several scenario maps, but it also includes templates, so you can build your own maps, you can draw your own, and there's even a free online map builder. The one we've got set up here is the Fetid Cave. And on the scenario map, it will indicate the victory point target here. This represents how many units you have to defeat in battle to win. Next to the victory point target is the squad size, which indicates how many units you can choose to form your squad. Also worth noting is the special rules area, where some scenarios might have additional rules, and the black and white flags, which represent each player's deployment area. However, we'll get to deployment in a minute. So once you've chosen your scenario map, each player will take a squad sheet. The squad sheet has areas indicating the name of your squad, tracking areas for victory points and sigil use, and the character or unit areas. Squads are made up of 6 different types of units. Each unit has a maximum health number, shown here by the number of available health icons. These icons are crossed off when a unit is defeated in battle. We'll get to battle later in the video. All units start with 6 maximum power, except for the rogue, who starts with 4. This area is used to track a unit's current power, and it should always be updated as it decreases during play as the unit takes damage in battle. You will also find an area for the name of the unit, its type, and their associated dice and special ability located here at the bottom. It's worth noting that unit types and abilities are universal, and they remain the same from player to player and squad to squad. So, for example, a scout, its ability is move up to 2 hexes, and it can move through other units with a single move action. This is universal, so my scout and my opponent's scout will always function the same way. But we'll return to unit abilities a little bit later after we've covered setup and a few more basics. Next, each player will select the appropriate number of units from their squad sheet that they will use during the game. Remember that the maximum squad size is indicated on your chosen scenario map. In this case, the squad size is 3, so each player is able to choose 3 units from their squad sheet. Each unit will start at its available health, which players write into the current power area on their squad sheet. For example, the rogue will start at 4. This number should always be updated to reflect the current status of your unit, so whenever they gain or lose power during play, their current power is always updated in this area. In Hex Barons, units are represented on the map with markers. This can be any set of objects that allows you to distinguish units as well as teams from one another. So in the base game, we use dice to represent units, and this is mainly just because dice are quite common and they easily represent a unit's power at a glance. Next, determine a starting player by rolling a d6, so the player that rolls the higher number goes first. When they deploy their squad on the map, they place all of their units either on or adjacent to their deployment marker. So once the starting player has deployed all of their units, the second player places their unit. In Hex Barons, battle is resolved using cards, and each player has a small battle deck. The deck is composed of number cards and 3 face cards, and you can use custom cards included with the game, or you can play the game with standard playing cards. When using standard playing cards, all the cards in the battle deck should be the same color, giving all the red cards to one player and all the black cards to the other. For this demo, we're going to be using the custom cards. The battle deck is made up of 2 aces or 1s, 2 2s, 3, 4, 5, and the 3 face cards, the Jack, Queen, King, or the Coward, the Rose, and the Crown. In addition to the battle deck, each player places an extra 3, 4, and 5 along the side of the map. These cards are your sideboard for crafting, which we'll discuss later in the video. Certain scenarios or rules might require the use of the Worm or the Joker card. But for our base game, we can set it aside. So, players shuffle their deck and draw 3 cards to form their hand. 1, 2, 3. During play, whenever a card is played or a new card is drawn, you'll always maintain a hand of 3 cards, immediately discarding down to 3 if you have more, or refilling your hand and drawing another card if you have less. If ever you must draw a card and you don't have any remaining cards in your battle deck, you shuffle the discard pile and flip it over to form a new battle deck to draw from. This completes setup, and now the game can begin. On your turn, you can take 2 actions. The main turn actions are moving and attacking, but there's other elements in the game that might require the use of a turn action, like activating certain terrain or unit abilities, or using your sigil power, which we will cover in a minute. These 2 actions can be the same action repeated, and they can be used by any combination of your units. The only restriction is that a single unit cannot attack twice in the same turn, but otherwise you can mix and match and repeat actions as you like. So let's look at how movement works. A basic move is extremely simple. To move a unit, you just move it into an adjacent hex, like that. However, with a move action, a unit can also bump an adjacent unit by moving into the hex that it occupies, forcing that unit to move 1 space in a single straight line in the same direction of movement. However, you can't bump a unit if the next hex is obstructed, and you can't bump a unit off the map. It's worth noting that you can bump both allied and enemy units, and that the unit being bumped ignores certain terrain effects. For example, you can bump a unit out of water with a single bump action, even though it normally requires 2 move actions to exit water onto a non-water hex. So let's look at terrain. Terrain modifiers can affect movement, battle, card draw, and more. Some terrain types, like the village, might require an action to use. Barriers block movement and melee attacks, but not ranged attacks. Portals connect 2 hexes anywhere on the map. Connected portals display the same numbered portal icon on their hexes, and they're considered adjacent for movement, melee attacks, and allied bonuses, although ranged attacks cannot pass through a portal. So now you know this, using movement, positioning, and terrain modifiers can be the key to victory. So that covers movement and terrain, and now let's look at how battles work. So using one of your turn actions, you can attack an enemy unit. An attack can either be a melee or a ranged attack. This depends on the unit that you're using to attack with. If it has the ranged attack ability, like the archer, it can perform a ranged attack. Both melee and ranged attacks work the same way, with one key difference when resolving damage, but we'll get to that in a second. The first step is that an attack is declared against a valid target. So melee attacks target adjacent units, while ranged attacks target enemy units at a distance of 2 hexes in a straight line from the attacker. So if the target is adjacent to the attacker, it must be resolved as a melee attack. The outcome of battle is determined by the highest total power between the attacker and defender. So, players must first choose a battle card from their hand and play it face down and then reveal it simultaneously. So the card value is added to the unit power, and then in addition to any modifiers from the terrain or other abilities, the highest total wins. In a melee battle, the damage that is dealt is equal to the difference between the totals. So, for example, my 6 power scout versus the 6 power warrior, my total would be 6 plus 3 minus 1 because I'm on a swamp. My opponent's total would be 6 plus 2 plus 1 because he's on a mountain, which gives him 9 and me 8. So, because it's a melee exchange, we're adjacent, the difference is 1, so I take 1 damage, and that would be reflected on my dice because it's easy to track, and I would change the value on my squad sheet as well. So it's worth noting that in a melee attack, the defender can also deal damage to the attacker. There's no guarantee that because you're attacking that you're safe. In a ranged attack, however, damage is capped at 1. If the defender wins the exchange with the higher total, the attack just misses and no damage is dealt. In any battle, ties go to the attacker. However, in a melee battle, as the damage dealt is the difference between totals, a tie results in no damage. After a battle has been resolved, players discard the card that they played into their discard pile. Cards in the discard pile should always be arranged face up so that they're visible to all players. Let's take a moment to look at the face cards of the battle deck and go over how they function. So as I mentioned, there are 3 face cards, and each of the face cards has a special effect when they're revealed in battle. So the Coward, or the Jack, causes your unit to suffer 1 damage, and then you have to reveal the other cards in your hand. However, after doing this, battle is aborted, and no further damage or actions are taken. The Rose, or Queen, allows you to roll a d6 to determine its power. So it could give you a value anywhere between 1 and 6. The Crown, or King, is a powerful card. It cancels your opponent's card or cards when it's revealed. However, the Crown does not cancel the Rose. The King does not cancel the Queen. So face cards are important, powerful cards that can really turn the tide of battle. So you should learn them well and pay attention to where they are in the game. Ally bonus is a bonus granted to an attacker for each ally that's adjacent to the target. So in this example, this 5-powered archer is performing a melee attack against this target. It would receive a +1 modifier for this adjacent ally. However, if there were 2 adjacent allies, it would receive +1 for each, giving it a +2 modifier for that melee combat. Ally bonuses only apply to melee attacks, and they do not apply to ranged attacks or when defending. So if ever a unit is reduced to 0 power, they're defeated and removed from the map. When a unit is defeated in battle, the winner immediately adds 1 victory point to their squad sheet in the appropriate area. The defeated unit, however, loses 1 health permanently. This is indicated by crossing off one of the health icons in their area on the squad sheet. Remember that units deploy at their available health. For a defeated unit, this has now been reduced by 1. So when that unit redeploys after being defeated, it's redeployed at a lower power. So we'll talk about redeployment in a moment, but for now, that covers the 2 main actions, movement and attacking. You're limited to 2 actions on your turn, but you can take additional actions by stressing your units. So this is done by having it suffer 1 damage per extra action. A unit with 1 current power cannot be stressed. And when stressing a unit, it's still limited to only 1 attack per turn. So let's move on now to redeployment and crafting new cards from your sideboard. As we discussed, when a unit is defeated in battle, they are removed. However, defeated units can be redeployed on a future turn as a free action. So as with setup, units must be redeployed on or adjacent to their deployment marker. Redeploying a unit allows you to take a crafting action before you place them back on the map. So let's take a look at how crafting works. Crafting allows you to gain a more powerful card from your sideboard, while removing lower powered cards from your deck. Crafting is a free action where you use 2 cards from your hand whose combined value is equal to or greater than the card you wish to craft. For example, I could craft this 3 with a 2 and a 1, or a 2 and a 2. However, there is one exception. You can also craft a card from your sideboard using a single face card in exchange for the crafted card. When you craft a card, you place it in your discard pile. You place the cards you used occupying the slot. Crafting only happens when you redeploy a defeated unit, and you can only craft 1 card per redeploy. So as your units take damage during play and lose power, if ever they get to 1 power, they become desperate. A desperate unit gains a desperation bonus of being able to play 1 extra battle card in both ranged and melee attacks. So this is for attacking or defending. So it's worth noting that the rogue, whose special ability is to play 2 battle cards, when they're desperate, they have 1 life left, they can go up to playing 3. Now, as a Baron, you have sold your soul and received a powerful hex from the Great Worm in the form of a special sigil. Now, sigil cards are powerful limited use abilities that you track by marking off each use on your squad sheet. Sigils come in various types, shown here on the card, which may affect the way the card can be used. For example, terrain sigils, like Trap, are drawn directly onto a local or adjacent hex. Whenever you use your sigil power, be sure to track its use in the sigil area on your squad sheet. Once you have used all of your sigil, it cannot be used again that game. The number of times you can use your sigil is indicated on the sigil card here. Well, there you have it. Now you know everything you need to play the full game of Hex Barons. Be the first player to reach the victory point target for your chosen scenario and claim your place among the Hex Barons. So if this video was helpful to you, or if you want more information, follow Studio Tour 2 Games on Instagram, join our Discord, or visit the Hex Barons website to get access to the free online map creator, scenarios, comics, videos, and join our growing community.